The progressive science of Wavevolution regards the transformation from waves to atoms, and its correlation to new understandings of the relation between space and time. Wavevolution extends the concept of evolution to all forms of energy, through a process of gradual changes that transform waves into atoms. All elements have one electric charge, one counterpart, and one mass. Massless does not exist. Symmetry is everywhere. Neutral elements are composites of two opposite charges, and are not elementary particles. Wavevolution is the energy transformation opposite to nuclear fission. Wavevolution is also the link that was missing to science to reveal the creation. The origin of the universe is revealed even by the spark appearing from the friction of two cutting blades while they are being sharpened. Try to videotape the spark appearing from those two blades. Then watch again the same film while it's being rewound, and in slow motion. You will see the light from the spark entering the blades and becoming part of them. In fact, the photons of light are the building blocks of the metal blades. This simple example should also be a clear indication to explain how the whole mass had been formed in the universe. Once they have reached one critical level of energy, lost heat as they travel, and having therefore reduced their frequencies, waves collapse, also forming two subatomic particles with opposite charges, as if they were the split ends of one broken hair. Since the Big Bang, waves continue to solidify into hydrogen atoms and transform their energy in different forms of mass. The human beings, made up of atoms, are the ultimate product of a slow process, started with transformed waves. In Wavevolution, all forms of energy constantly transform. The same quantum of energy, originally carried by any wave, becomes gradually fragmented and dispersed by the encountered interferences. For example, quanta of gamma rays, over time, will lower their potential to become X-rays. And X-rays will gradually become ultraviolet rays, diminishing their original frequencies. The initial quantum of energy is transformed in different forms through spontaneous symmetry breaking. Wavevolution shows how the behavior in waves and atoms is identical, and how this single movement, common to all energy, is comparable to one divine will that creates the whole universe. The discovery of the existence of one universal law that had one beginning, about 14 billion years ago, and that was not caused by humankind, confirms as a consequence the existence of one creator. Erroneously, traditional science theorizes that all energy existing in the universe converged in one point, with its own space. And that from this single point, about 14 billion years ago, the whole universe had been created. Nevertheless, this theory is without foundations, and destined to remain inconclusive. Its contradictions originate from Einstein's faulty conclusions, and from the reverence shown by modern scientists, who are too afraid to take a new stand that may not be aligned with the late scientist. Einstein believed that the universe was like one closed space, and that one fixed number of atoms had always existed. Hence he did not believe that new atoms are constantly formed from waves. The Jewish scientist also believed that the space is independent from the concept of time. In this regard, his confusion may have originated from that word makom, which had been used in the Bible. Jeremiah 23:24.
Do I not fill heaven and earth?
To define without distinction, God, and also space. As if this last one was also eternal and indivisible. Instead, any space, even the hypothetical original point of energy, is always divisible. Each space could be constantly split by one movement that occurs at one time. There are no time and movement if there is no space. There are no movement and space without time. There are no space and time without movement. But if one of the three exists, also the other two exist. If the creation began from one point, existing in one space prior to the Big Bang, that same point could not be the beginning of time and creator of all things. One space before the Big Bang necessarily implies also the presence of a time pre-existing that same event. Furthermore, one indivisible point could not exist anyhow. In fact, the smallest space could only be a sphere. And even if the original point of energy, prior to the Big Bang, was infinitely small, it could not have been a sphere. The sphere has a perimeter at the diameter, but also smaller perimeters as we move upward or downward from the larger diameter. The concept of infinitely small precludes the possibility of smaller perimeters. The unimaginable point, infinitely small, smaller than a sphere, and indivisible, if exploded, would have spread its energy at once. The lack of space, in the indivisible point infinitely small, eliminates the possibility of time and movement for the creation of the universe. While instead, the universe is created in time. Thus, the universe did not begin from one space, or from an indivisible point, which does not exist. It is difficult for us to imagine the creation, also because God, as the first source, caused the energy to expand, but was never moved by any other preceding cause. The concept of causality, existing in our world, does not apply to God and its creation. In our world, life is a constant chain reaction. Everything we experience is the effect of a previous cause, and also the cause for a new effect. In fact, we have no knowledge of any source that is now moving, and that was not previously moved by another source. But how can one first existence evolve from nothing? Any existence that we know of lives always restricted within the three concepts: time, space, and movement. As for example, at any moment in time, you occupy one space during your life, which is movement. These three concepts always exist together, or else there is lack of existence in our dimension. Time, space, and movement started simultaneously, as God generated the so-called Big Bang from one dimension of stability, and caused one movement, quantum mechanics, which symmetrically fragments and recombines all energy to form over time one expanding space, the universe. Since the event of the Big Bang, the universe is like one mirror, split into many small mirrors, which are constantly joining and separating through this same movement. Like in a big puzzle, every edge of each small mirror is symmetrically opposite and complementary to the mirror standing next on its side. Two contiguous small mirrors are attracted by this natural movement, and together, they generate a new and third form of the same energy. This is how the universe continues to expand in always new forms. God's idea fragments its energy to spread it in one universe which is in constant expansion. Dimension with time, space, and movement. And to fill one void that is infinite, beyond all borders. Dimension without time, space, or movement. This is inconceivable for us, which we live restricted by those three concepts. The law of attraction between two opposite and complementary elements is the single universal law that also provides for the existence of one order in the universe, and that rearranges the symmetries of its fragmented forms. All forms of energy in the universe are orchestrated by a constant rearrangement of their magnetic fields. As if they were the many pawns, moved mechanically, in one eternal chess game, and by the same hand. Quantum mechanics is God's instrument that constantly reunites and reseparates all energy in order to always create new forms. The concept always, so unreachable for us, is the endless bridge between one limited dimension, the universe, and one infinite, the void. We can now define this constant recurrence as one law, one direction, or also one will, since it remains forever unchanged. What is beyond the universe and beyond time? If it is true that we could count time backwards, 13 billion years, or even 14 billion, why not also 15? Before 14 billion years ago, and before the space of the universe, time did not exist. What, then? Stability. An unreachable concept for those who are made of energy.